Hey everyone, it's Kevin Towson with Permeate. We're excited to have a guest on today, but wanted to first talk about the topic is really as a Permeate, we want to create a culture of evangelism for every age and stage, but specifically we've been doing some videos on youth, focusing on how we create a culture of evangelism with youth. And so we've had a couple videos, but today we want to talk about what it means to to have youth on mission and youth doing evangelism and how that is so critical. Evangelism to youth is important, but we believe that evangelism being done by youth is actually the most effective. And so the guest today I want to introduce is Josh Wilson. So maybe Josh, do you want to introduce yourself and also a little bit of your current role?
Yeah, so I am currently a youth pastor or youth director at Pennsylvania Newtown Christian Church. It's a Chinese church, and my history has been some missions work. I was a missionary for about a year, and then I did a bunch of evangelism for about another year down in Florida with a good friend of ours. You probably know Eric Dressel. He's a
Yep,
street preacher,
good
and
guy.
we did college campus evangelism. And yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And taking my evangelism background, going into the church, I figured that it would be great for the youth to be doing it as well. So
Yeah, awesome. And the church they're part of, I visited. They're an awesome group of brothers and sisters in Christ. And yeah, Josh has been awesome, and I'm excited because I think he has the almost a formula or a experience of how this has been effective in his church specifically. And so, why would you say, like, as you brought this youth evangelism into your local body, why would you say evangelism by youth is so effective in your experience?
yeah, I definitely think that evangelism by youth to other youth is very effective. You see this in many cultures where if the people in the culture are evangelizing to other people in their culture, it tends to be more effective. And it's the same way, I think, with the youth. If a high school student is evangelizing to other high school students, it has a different impact, it has a different effect. I love the old guard of evangelists, I love the old guys who go out there and do it. But there is something to having people who are the same as you talking to you about their faith that has a different impact as a higher generation. Then you can say, oh, it's just old people, this is for old people or something like that. But if it's your peers, then it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that too. And just even you look at like peer pressure and people like following others type thing, it's like we can, as youth, if youth can point them to Jesus, there will be more likely to follow because they're one of them, if you will. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Definitely.
And inevitably there's some fear, especially like youth, because they're young in the faith, they're still learning and growing and all that. There's a lot of times there's fear or other detractors of why should I go to evangelism, and like there's a fear that paralyzes them. So how have you motivated students to actually go and do evangelism? What has that been like?
Yeah, so our first time out to Ocean City, we had a group maybe of like 10 to 15, I can't remember, but most of them were very afraid and they did not want to evangelize, and that's totally fine. So kind of how I did it on our first year is I knew about four of our kids were bold enough, they were ready to go, they were ready to go out and evangelize. So when we went, I only brought four signs, and I gave those four signs to the four people that I knew could do it and that they were going to do it. And I knew that other people might do it if they saw how kind of easy it is. Actually, it's very easy. Once they saw that it's not as scary as they think, then they would want to join it. So I gave them those four main people the signs, and then I paired them up with some people who were more shy. And then after the first night of seeing the heaven test going out and how easy it is and how fun it is, those people who were more shy would start jumping in. And some of the kids, I have like one or two who were so shy that they didn't actually do it until this past year, which is our third year going. So it's okay. I just let them hand out tracts. I let them, stand and listen. But eventually, you want to keep encouraging them every night, being like, hey, look, like you can do this. This is so easy. Look, we've practiced these questions. You know how to do it. You know how the flow goes. It's actually quite simple. And yeah, this past year, our third year, we've had basically everybody, every all ages going out there and sharing the heaven test with people. So yeah, it was really great.
That's awesome. And can you maybe, for those who might not know about like the Ocean City trip, can you talk about what the format is for the students and the trip that you took them on?
Yeah, so we go out for a week into Ocean City and we rent a house, we have our time out there and we use this method that you've probably seen on this channel many times, the heaven test. The heaven test is extremely cheesy. It's really funny. People laugh when they see it. But I love it, and people love it, and people will come up and they will talk to you. And basically, what you do is you ask them like, "Oh, if you died today, and you stood before God, and He asked you, why should I let you into heaven? What would you say?" Right? And if you've seen these conversations, you know how they go. I'm a good person. I'm going to heaven, and that is the perfect segue, right, to the gospel and how to introduce them to why that's not going to work. And it's very simple. And like I said, the more the kids see that, the more they're willing to jump in and do it themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good, and it's almost like the motivation by watching others do it, to see it, and,
Mhm.
I think that's really important to just come and observe, and you didn't force anyone to do anything. "Hey, just stand and watch. Hey, do tracks," or something like that. I
Mhm.
think that's a good way to onboard them softly, if you will.
Mhm.
So in that trip and in that process, you, like, identified the leaders or the influencers of the group
Mhm.
and doing that, it's great, but how did you train them beforehand? Like, what did that look like, that prior to the evangelism, prior to the trip, what did the training look like?
Yeah, so our first year going out, I had recently started at the church. I may have been there for about 4 months before we went on our first Ocean City trip. So that first period, I really hammered the gospel in because I wasn't sure how familiar they were with the gospel going into the church. So I was really hammering that in already. And then we got to Ocean City was coming up. So for the about 2 months leading up to the trip, I just trained them like crazy on the heaven test. We did mock conversations. We went through difficult questions. We went through basically everything. And through all of that training, the kids went out onto the boardwalk very equipped. This was not just like a 2 weeks prior, let's go out. This was like 2 months. So we did 2 months, Fridays, every Friday. We would probably talk about evangelism in some way. And then through all of the training, we get out on the boardwalk and then they start having these conversations with people and they realize that the training that we put them through and the hard questions that they were going to get, they actually had very solid answers to. And once they saw that it works and that what we believe actually holds up to criticism and scrutiny, it gave them a lot more boldness. And that's what was very helpful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's beautiful, and that's like music to my ears that we're not just telling people to go share the gospel, whether it's in their friends or coworkers or on the street. It's like training is so critical because people don't know how to articulate the gospel or answer the questions. And so it's really awesome that you've seen that power and the effectiveness of that specifically to youth. And so as you trained and trained effectively, it seems you did the evangelism. What has been the result of getting them to do evangelism? Like, how has it impacted their personal faith, would you say?
Yeah, so basically every time we have our Ocean City trip, we see tremendous growth in all of the youth. It's just like night and day. They are one way before the trip, then they're another way after the trip. And it's really awesome to see that their faith grows because the sharing of your faith increases your faith. And when you see that your faith actually holds firm, it strengthens your faith. And I've seen just tremendous growth in the youth, and not just in their ability to articulate the gospel, but like their ability to be bold in the face of like crowds of people. These are shy Chinese kids, like they don't talk to people, right? They just sit on their phones and hide, right? But when they're standing there, like we have this one girl, Lizzie. I love Lizzie. She's maybe like 4'10" at the most, and she will stand before a group of like 6 foot tall high schoolers, just like proclaiming the gospel. And every objection that they have, she just shuts it right down, like gives them the perfect answer, and is awesome to see, right? And before going to Ocean City, she would never even imagine talking to anyone like that, right? But because she's bold in the gospel, she's bold in faith. She's able to stand before these giants, compared to her. We have pictures. It's really funny. She's able to use her faith to strengthen her. So we've seen tremendous growth. Like, I mean, just it's my favorite time of year going to Ocean City because I know that the kids are going to learn something, and they're going to strengthen their faith. They're going to strengthen the faith of their peers. And through the club, or through the evangelism, kids in our group have started a Christian club at their schools. They share their faith with their friends. It's been really great. We absolutely love to see and hear the stories. They'll come to us actually at youth group sometimes, and they'll say, "Oh, I was sharing my faith with my friend, and they had this question. Can you help me with this question?" Right? And that just is music to my ears, right? Because then I'm like, okay, well, like, you may have not have known the answer, but you're sharing your faith with your friends, which is great. I love it. So I'm really excited. I love to take them out to Ocean City for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful, and it not only strengthens their faith in spite of all the things coming at them, but now it causes them to go and share their faith in their school, in their workplace, wherever it might be.
Hmm.
And so it's so effective in doing evangelism for faith, and also now they're going and share it. So it's really creating a culture of evangelism, which it really seems like you have, which is
Hmm.
beautiful. And so as closing, what is one way to close up? What is one way you can encourage either parents or other youth leaders to get the youth sharing the gospel? What would be one way to encourage them?
I mean, I think that the first thing that you need to do before you start taking other people out is doing it yourself, right? So if you're sharing your faith and you're doing the evangelism yourself, then it should be very easy. When you're passionate about something, it's very easy to make others passionate about it. So I had been doing evangelism in Florida for a year prior. I had been going to college campuses and evangelizing to people about my age, right? And I took that love of evangelism and I brought it to my group and I showed it to them. And then I let them do it and feel the same joy of doing it. And on all of that has kind of motivated them to do it as well. So if you want to motivate someone to do something, you actually have to love doing it yourself. It's the only way. It's like if you're a preacher, you have to love God in order to share that love with other people. It's like that. So that would be my biggest tip is probably doing it yourself.
That's awesome, and it truly becomes contagious. And so, thank you, Josh, for coming on. And for anyone listening, if you have any questions, either for Josh or I, about youth evangelism, getting them on mission, creating a culture of evangelism, we'd love to talk to you, and support you in any way that we can as well. We're praying for you all, that you would again focus on the youth and getting a culture of evangelism within that age group. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Josh, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. See you later.